you see areas of weakness and you see patterns of strength or tightness in the body that become, out of balance. And a lot of that can be that postural piece where if that head is constantly pulling forward, those muscles they're fatigued, they become weaker because they're working way harder than they need to work. Mm-hmm. And then the upper thoracic spine will often start to lock up just to help anchor and hold that head. And it's such a subtle thing. It's not like you really always, you can necessarily feel that. Some people can. But it can be such a gradual process that you don't even realize that you're stuck there and weak there and tight in the front until you change it. And then people are amazed that they could feel that good or they could breathe that good.
You're listening to My Evolved Life, a podcast that simplifies health and fitness and helps you maximize your life. My name is Vuna Nguyen, and I'm the creator of the Evolution Training System. We're so lucky to be living in the information age, meaning it's easier than ever to access information and find answers to any questions you may have. But isn't it confusing when you read information that's conflicting, or worse yet, just sounds wrong? I'll be sitting down with industry professionals to give you clarity and leave you with tangible actions you can take immediately to improve your physical, mental, and psychological health. Today's guest is Karen Quinn. Karen has been a chiropractor over the past 14 years, and through her practice, she aspires to optimize human potential. She helps her clients tap into that potential by ensuring that they have an optimal nervous system, body balance, and lifestyle support. She does this to not only add years to their life, but more importantly, add life to their years. We get a ton of questions about back pain and posture, so it is with absolute pleasure that I have Karen on the show. So Karen, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So Karen, before we dive into your practice, I kind of want to dissect one of your beliefs.
Okay.
I love it. You believe that true health is a matter of function, and it can't be defined by an absence of illness. That sounds absolutely profound to me. Can you tell me about that, what it means, and where that belief comes from?
Man, well, where the belief came from probably evolved over time, and I'll come back to that, so remind me if I go on a tangent. Mm-hmm. It's actually the World Health Organization definition of health, which is interesting, that it is complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. That's the formal definition of health that they give as well. And I feel like our beliefs are so subtle, we don't even realize sometimes that we have them. So if someone believes that an absence of illness, for instance, is health, then being symptom-free means that they're healthy. But we both know and have experienced in different aspects of our life that there can be things going on without obvious symptoms that, aren't the healthiest processes and lead to illness down the road. And so, I guess my belief became apparent to me, whether I had it earlier or not, when I was studying in university. So I went to University of Calgary, studied in kinesiology, and majored in exercise and health physiology. And I loved that program. And what they focused mostly on when I took it back in 1998, mm-hmm. And I'm sure they still focus on this, is just, health. And if you eat well, if you move well, if you take care of your body the way that it's designed to function in the first place, then it will be healthy, and you can absolutely prevent a lot of illnesses, and outwardly, not just early prevent, not just early detect, but outwardly prevent and avoid certain diseases and illnesses. And so I thought, well, why don't people just do that then, right? Mm-hmm. And so that got my wheels spinning, and in really kind of becoming more conscious of how I view health and how I view the body. And I got excited that we're actually designed to be healthy in the first place, and that symptoms, although unpleasant some of the time, and although we don't want them to be chronic, that's a whole other conversation. Mm-hmm. But symptoms are often signs that our body is functioning, and so if you have pain, it's that warning bell that something may need to be looked at or backed off on, or what have you. And there's a million examples that I could go into about that, but I'm not sure if that answers your question.
It does.
Yeah.
And I do want to elaborate on that. It very much sounds like when you say function, you don't just mean physical function. It's mental function. It's very complete, right?
Yeah.
And likewise, when you say illness, it's not just cough, cough, I'm sick, but it's injury. It's all sorts of illness.
It's how it all connects together, right? And so even if you have, a sprained ankle, for instance, and you roll it on the basketball court, well, now you're walking differently. So now you're going to affect your hip and how that ankle is moving. Now the knee might have to take on more force because it's not being absorbed by the movement of the ankle properly. So there's a trickle up and a trickle down effect throughout the whole body, through every tissue, through every system of the body, but also through that mental, social side too. Because again, if that basketball player sprains their ankle and that's their mental outlet, well, now they can't play basketball, right? So how does that affect other aspects of their life and their full holistic health?
So that really leads me into the practice of chiropractics. Is that the correct word?
Chiropractic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that the word? Okay. So let's talk about that. I believe that when it comes to chiropractic, the practice, there is still a misconception that it's simply an adjustment of the spine. You come in, you get a few cracks, and you leave. But I believe that there's a lot more to it than that. And just by seeing you nod your head, I think you're in agreement.
Yeah.
So let's get your professional input. What is the practice like?
Well, I can speak for my own practice. There is a wide range of ways and approaches to practice within the profession, and they're all great, really. I mean, there's so many different techniques. There's so many different focuses. So some may be focused more in sports or more in prenatal or pediatric. So I can speak on my own experience.
Absolutely.
So your question is?
What does the practice entail?
Okay. So my practice, and I would say, the majority of chiropractors that I know closely, we're focused on determining if there's any imbalance to the body, both biomechanically, but also mainly primarily in the neuromuscular skeletal system. And so we're looking not only at maybe structure in terms of looking at posture and looking at, the global look at things, but segmentally as well, but also in addition to that, how is that impacting then the body beyond that? So great, you have a vertebrae that's rotated that needs to be rotated back, but what is that impact of that rotated vertebra doing to the body, and what led to that rotation in the first place? And so not only just correcting, the imbalances that we may find, there's a lot of times we find good too, which I think is equally as valuable. But then to also figure out, okay, well, correcting this is great, but then we don't want you to then go back into your world and your lifestyle that's going to then recreate that over and over and over again. Because otherwise we're just, a very complicated Band-Aid for a bigger problem potentially.
So your practice really, it very much addresses the body as an entire system.
Yes.
Which sounds amazing. But going back to that misconception where chiropractors, they only address back issues.
Yeah.
How do they know the difference between, let's say they have a lower body injury, so below the back. How do they know whether to go to a physiotherapist or a chiropractor? I think that's where things start to get a little bit gray.
Yeah. And there may be appropriate to see both or either. I think physio is great. I work with physiotherapists quite a bit and refer to them quite a bit. And so there's definitely times where, I might have someone in my own practice where I know that, this is not my specialty, but these people, this population or this practitioner will do a better job at figuring this out than I will. And I would hope that it would go kind of both ways as well. I think if someone sees someone that they trust and they're not sure, is it physio or chiro, if they have a practitioner that they trust, that's what should happen regardless, right? So that if someone wasn't sure if it's a physio issue and they came to see me, then I would be able to let them know, like, I'm not the person, you go see this person down the street, or see your physio if you have a physio that you love. I typically will refer to physio a lot if there's, if it needs more rehab, like if they need more tools beyond, my hands or an alignment, and if we want more modalities that I don't have in my practice. But there is definitely overlap in professions. And so I can see the confusion for sure.
To the point of going to somebody you trust. If somebody, like you said, if somebody were to come to you, whether it's one of your existing clients or a new one, and you believe that it's out of your scope and it belongs in the hands of a physiotherapist, you would refer them that way.
Yep.
And you would hope that it's also vice versa.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and I've had people come in who have already been maybe to physio or acupuncture or, name any profession in that in that blank, and they may not have gotten the results that they wanted. And sometimes it's not that, and I tell this to the patient, it's often not that modality or that approach was incorrect or inappropriate, but they might have needed one other thing.
Yeah.
And so once they've had, if I have that piece that hasn't been addressed and they see that balance, then I'll often encourage them, go back to that practitioner and have them evaluate you again, because what they find now may be different and their results might be different too.
So one of the things that I wanted to talk about today, and I really hope to get your assurance, so to speak, that the practice is actually very, very safe. I know many chiropractors who have great success stories, but there is still a little bit of a fear component,
Yep.
right? Because again, going back to the fact that when we think chiropractors, we think back, we think spine.
Yep.
And I think it's fairly common knowledge that your spine is very, very important. It's your lifeline, right? So the notion, the perception rather, when you go to the chiropractor, you're going to be put into positions and certain pressure is going to be placed and your spine is going to pop back into place. Things are going to rotate, what have you. So there is a little bit of a fear component. What if something goes wrong?
Yeah.
Right? So how would you assure somebody that your practice, and we're talking just about your practice, is very, very safe? Yeah.
Well, there's so many answers to that question.
Sure.
One is just blankly for all chiropractors, we're very highly regulated. There's extensive education that goes into becoming a chiropractor, extensive testing to have the privilege of being licensed. And that continues every year with continuing education and standards that we're expected and want to meet. And so I feel safe, with my colleagues, that they know what they're doing and they're highly trained in what they're doing. Now with my practice, there's so many different techniques and approaches with how to balance the spine or how to adjust the spine. And, back to even one of your earlier comments about chiropractic being about backs, I understand that because why people, perceive that, because that's our prime focus, right? Mm-hmm. In terms of the source of starting there at that foundation, the foundation of the spine, the foundation of the nervous system is kind of the pinnacle piece of chiropractic. And so in my practice, I don't do a lot of manual adjusting, which is what most traditional chiropractors, traditional pictures of what chiropractors do is the adjustments that might create a pop or a crack. I do occasionally, with permission, from my practice members, if I feel like it's necessary. And I don't choose this other technique because I feel that is unsafe at all. I just have always decided I'm going to approach my patients in the way that I receive care, and I don't get a lot of manual adjusting for myself. That being said, I think the biggest key with all practitioners is communication. And before anyone gets adjusted, there should be an extensive exam. There should be that history taken. There should be that rapport build before that even happens. There should be a communication of what that chiropractor is going to do. I go through that with my patients and explaining, what they can expect. Usually my communication with them is, you're going to think I'm not doing enough, because they're expecting it to be this, that they're, especially if they're in pain. I think often as humans, we think that intervention has to magnitude of the intervention has to match the magnitude of the pain, which is not true in all cases. And so I think the biggest key is that you have that communication from the get-go. And I would never adjust somebody if there was hesitation or if they were unsure. And so, if there's ever someone that just needs to even they're still a little bit nervous about it, I'll ask them their questions, I'll address them. And then if they're still nervous, I'll just say, you know what, think on it. I'm not going anywhere. Your information's here. Let's, if you have more questions, go home, talk to your spouse, talk to, you can come back in, ask more questions if you want, but making sure that person feels okay in the first place is, I think, the most important piece.
You said something really important there, and maybe you didn't directly say it, but you're suggesting it. The communication is two ways. It's not just you communicating your expectations of the treatment with the patient, but they have to fully communicate with you as well.
100%.
If they're slightly unsure, it is their job to tell you, hey, Karen, I'm not too sure about this. Is there a different method or what have you? It has to go both ways.
Yeah.
So you used a couple words there, and I just wanted to get some clarity on it. For the purposes of, I like to remove as much confusion as possible. So you use the words balance and alignment. So when it comes to the human body, what does balance versus unbalance look like? And then what does alignment and out of alignment look like?
Okay, good question. Balance depends on what context you're talking about it in. Balance, I think, in itself, just as a word in general, is a bit of a tricky word because I don't think anything is ever in balance. Our body, the whole concept of homeostasis is just that finding balance, but it's going, it's always going back and forth and just kind of trending towards as best as we can be, right? So balance in my communication, I'm thinking more, if I'm looking at posture, for instance, I'm looking for symmetry. I'm looking for, if to be specific, say I'm looking to see, are their hips level, are their shoulders level, is there tilt, is there rotation? There's a ideal posture that we should have. I hate the word should. That we strive for is maybe a better way to put that. And we're just looking to see, okay, where are you in the context of that? It doesn't mean that that's going to be that person's ideal. If someone has scoliosis, well, we may never get them there. And so we're looking for that person individually, their ideal, and where are we kind of seeing that trend towards, and over time monitoring that so that we can see that they're continually moving forward into the best balance. I'm not sure if that answers your question.
It does.
Or not. And then in terms of alignment, I think there's two ways to look at alignment. There's a global alignment, so that kind of overlaps with the posture. So spinal curves, how are the areas related to each other, and in kind of a global aspect. But then there's specific segmental alignment. And so that's looking at each individual vertebra to see not only is it in place, is it rotated, what direction, is it tilted? And so that if we know that and we know where it needs to be, we can know what specifically, how to specifically adjust that. And also when to know not to touch it and when to just leave it alone.
I'm going to make a statement. And I want you to agree or disagree with me.
Okay.
And if you agree, I would love for you to elaborate.
Okay.
For the most part, when we're born, we're in relative balance and we're in relative alignment. And over the course of our lifetimes, our practices and our habits contribute to us slowly deviating from balance or from perfect alignment. If that's true, what are the practices that we undertake that cause us to be out of balance?
Okay. Well, we can lose balance even in utero, to be honest.
Okay.
Not always. I've checked, newborn babies that don't need to have any, adjustment, and they're great and they're doing well. And I've checked others that are holding a posture that either occurred in utero or during the birth process. So it can be as early as that, which is why it's great, I think, to check early on and observe just the symmetry and whatnot.
Great.
But as we grow older, if you're starting right from, infancy, we all know the milestones we kind of move through, from sitting to crawling and walking. There's a lot of bumps and falls along the way, and kids are pretty resilient. And so it doesn't mean that they're, doomed for, injury or losing their balance, but it's possible. So there's definitely a lot of physical aspects we could trace through our life, sports injuries, sitting as a student, sitting as a computer office worker. And now the biggest one is probably the smartphones, the tablets that we're constantly looking down. And to touch on that, actually, it's interesting. I often with children, with infants, we recommend tummy time, right? And it helps strengthen their neck. It helps them strengthen their backs so that they're able to support their head better. And it's really great for their development. And then we stopped recommending it, right? And then I was in a yoga workshop, a couple of years ago, and we had to hold cobra pose. Cobra pose, where you're just basically, It's basically tummy time. We had to hold it for 10 minutes. And I was like, this is hard.
10 minutes.
And it's mentally hard. It was physically hard. And that was like an aha moment for me, because I'm like, we recommend tummy time for children. And I'm seeing more and more, a loss of that cervical curve, a loss of that neck curve in teens even, but definitely adults. And in the beginning, when we didn't have a cervical curve, it was holding the head up and that strength that got us there. And so we need more tummy time, and so it was kind of an aha moment of just how, paying attention to what we're doing and what positions we're holding. Are we sleeping in one position every single night? Do we have the support? It's kind of infinite list of things. So it's not to be, in fear of that, but just to be aware. And then if we know that, though, and we're aware of what our lifestyle typically is and is, presenting to us physically, then we can counter those postures, and we can do things to strengthen and to help prevent and counter those postures, because not everyone's going to quit their computer job, right?
No.
Or, dentists and hairstylists are some of the worst ergonomic positions that you really can't do much about, right? But in addition to that, I mentioned a lot of physical, car accidents. Those are kind of the obvious ones. And when we have a physical injury or physical pain or dysfunction, that's often where our brain goes. It's like, what did I do? Right? I just tied my shoe. And it's like, well, you tied your shoe every day for how many years? It wasn't the tying of the shoe. It was the many micro traumas, typically, barring, aside from a car accident or an event, but it was the many micro traumas through your life that your body was constantly compensating to, that one tying of the shoe that one time was just like, I can't accommodate this anymore. And addition to physical, though, there's also the chemical and the mental emotional aspects that can affect our posture, that can affect our physiology as well, just as much. And so those often don't get really talked about. I feel like they're being talked about more and more as the wellness industry is kind of evolving and growing.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And they all can be relevant. I can talk about it. Yeah.
Let's do it.
So the biggest thing I talk about with in terms of the chemical side of things, and often if someone has extensive chemistry, like hormonal imbalance or things like that, I'll refer to naturopaths, or I'll refer to a practitioner that is more well-versed or can kind of dive deeper into something like that. But in general, if someone has, say, back pain, which is, pretty common, or headaches, there can be vitamin deficiencies. It can be as easy as hydrating, right? It seems so obvious, but it's something that can be really, underlooked at or underutilized. But the inflammation piece is key. So, we often hear about people that have shifted their diet or taken certain things out, and their pain goes away, right? And so again, pain's not everything. It doesn't mean that dysfunction and that the physical effects of that have completely gone away, but it's a key piece to support, right? If you want to get better faster, we need to fuel our bodies in the way that, is going to support that. So, it's kind of something to look at to facilitate healing, but also that longevity piece beyond, your symptom relief.
So it's really a matter of not treating anything in isolation. Everything, it is very, very much an interconnected system.
Yeah.
So going back to lifestyle, I think just to summarize, yes, today we are constantly looking down at our phones, and because of our desk jobs, and you said it yourself, it's not like we just quit our jobs,
Yeah.
right? But it's the practices that you might do outside of work, right? Are you continuing to sit?
Yeah.
Are you jumping right onto the couch when you get home, right? It really is
Exactly.
that sedentary lifestyle slash phone usage that is really contributing to really poor posture.
Yeah.
You talked a lot about natural curvature. Can we talk about that? I don't think there is a natural understanding that there does exist
Yeah.
natural curves in our spine, right?
Yeah.
That should be there.
Absolutely. So with posture, and I think this is might be where it gets lost in translation, is posture. When we communicate it from this, looking at the side, we want to have ear, shoulder, hip, knee, and ankle all in one straight line. From the front, we should be vertical and then have level shoulders, level hips, and no head tilt, no head rotation. With the spine, though, it's a little bit different. So if we were to strip away muscles, fat, all the connective tissue, and just look at the bones, from the front, it should be vertical and straight, but from the side, there should be curves. And the primary curve in our body is our thoracic curve, our upper back, because when we're in utero, we're curved in that fetal position. And so we're born with that curve typically. And then the secondary curves are the neck, the cervical curve, and the lumbar curve. And those are developed with gaining strength and the movement milestones that we were talking about a bit earlier. And so those curves are equally important, but they come in once we're moving around. But those curves help with offsetting force. They absorb force, they create strength for the spine, and they allow, all of our bones, if you look at a spine, all of the bones have certain surfaces that they're kind of setting onto the next, right? And so if we shift that curve, then all of those are a little bit offset differently, right? And there's different pressure not only on the joint surfaces, but also in the supporting tissues that we add back onto that to create that body, right? So the muscles now have to function differently. The most prominent one that we see, or that I see in my practice, is that forward head carriage. And again, that is often from looking down a lot. It can be from other things too, but that's probably the most common. And we have a very heavy head on this very flexible, movable neck. And so as we move forward, it becomes heavier and heavier, and that's physics. I have software that calculates how heavy your head should weigh versus how heavy it feels like it weighs based on your posture. And it's fascinating and it's eye-opening for people. If they're carrying around, what should be a 15-pound head, and it weighs 60 pounds based on their angle of their head. It's crazy. And so we want to see that come down. That's how much energy is being devoted to just holding your head up, right? But then you look at how are those muscles in the back, and as a trainer, as a body specialist as yourself, you see areas of weakness and you see patterns of strength or tightness in the body that become, out of balance. And a lot of that can be that postural piece where if that head is constantly pulling forward, those muscles they're fatigued, they're become weaker because they're working way harder than they need to work. And then the upper thoracic spine will often start to lock up just to help anchor and hold that head. And it's such a subtle thing. It's not like you really always, you can necessarily feel that. Some people can, but it can be such a gradual process that you don't even realize that you're stuck there and weak there and tight in the front until you change it. And then people are amazed that they could feel that good or they could breathe that good.
I think everything that you said there really deserves a visual, and I'm sure you have them all over your website. I mean, yes, it makes sense that because our upper spine supports the weight of our head, there is some natural curvature there. But then to put it into perspective really, really deserves either a skeleton or a picture. So if you have one, definitely send it to me and we'll link it to,
sounds good.
just so that they have that visual. They can match your words to an image, right?
Well, and even from an experiential perspective, the example I usually will give to people that I'm chatting with one-on-one is most people have been bowling. If not, most people have held a small child or something heavy of some kind. And if you hold it really close to you, might feel heavy, but you can do that for a while typically. But if you had to hold it out in front of you for an extended period of time, it wouldn't take long before you start feeling your back tighten. You start feeling your arms start to get fatigued. And so imagining that might be a little bit easier than picturing how that is happening actually in your own body every single day.
Mm-hmm. So going back to what you were saying earlier, when you know, as a body specialist, I appreciate that. As you start to, you know, say you're putting time in the gym and you focus on one muscle group more than you do others. So specifically for men, for instance, it's going to be chest, right? And that is going to cause tightness in the chest, but weakness in the back, causing some of this, right? So that is very, very much compensation.
Yeah.
On that train of thought, I love the way that you approach the practice treating the body as a whole. So how can issues in the spine transcend to issues elsewhere, whether it's lower body or above?
How?
Mm-hmm.
Oh man.
How and why?
How and why?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, there's so many pathways. There's a lot of direct ways that can happen. So in that example that I was giving in just how the upper back starts to tighten and lock up because that head is forward, and that head could be forward because of repetitive pattern, or it could be forward because of a misalignment and the body's just trying to kind of compensate for that. The hard part with anatomy and physiology is that to understand it, you have to take it into pieces, but that's not how it functions, right? And so with anatomy, you know, when we learn anatomy, we look at the skeletal system, we look at the muscular system, we look at the nervous system, all in isolation because we need it. Each one of them requires such amount of detail. What we didn't learn about in kinesiology or even in chiropractic college, you know, years ago when I was there was anything or much about the connective tissue system. And I think that's the biggest system that's coming into light in the last 5 to 10 years. Probably in the last 5 years, more prevalent. Maybe that's when I've been more looking into it more, that fascial system. So they all interconnect, but there's lines through the body that aren't separated by just, you know, extremities or by segments of the body. There's fascial lines, connective tissues that attach at the feet that then end essentially at the top of the head, that help to integrate movement, that help to integrate all of our tissues, our muscles, our organs, and allow things to slide and glide properly. So that's a big system that I work with and communicate with people about of why I'm giving them an exercise to roll their feet for their low back pain.
So I understand. That was a very, very loaded question. It was a big question.
I don't even know how to start.
No, that's okay.
Yeah.
Let me rephrase that question by giving you a standard example.
Okay, that's perfect.
I understand, and this is fairly common for women who wear high heels. So this is vice versa. I was asking about the spine and how that affects other areas of your body, but I want to take it and flip that question. Okay. So women who wear high heels. So that is a natural pattern at the ankle joint. Yeah. We've heard, or is often said, that can transcend up and cause issues in the low back.
Okay. Yeah.
So how does that work?
This will be way easier to answer.
There you go.
I'm like, going through my textbook brain.
No, that's okay.
It's okay. Okay, the best way to answer that is, and the most simplest way I think, is to imagine that every joint in your body is designed for stability or mobility. And I think I blogged about this years ago. So if you think about your ankle joint, for instance, it's designed to be really mobile, right? We can roll it, we can, you know, flex, extend, we can move it in a lot of different directions. Our knee, not so much. Our knee is designed to be stable, and we want it to bend and straighten to a certain degree, and that's it. Our hips, designed like a socket joint, so it's designed for a lot of mobility. Okay, so we know how these joints are kind of laid out. Now, if we change the role of each joint, or even one of the joints, for instance, the ankle. So we put it into a high heel. So now it's locked in a position, and it might look nice, but it doesn't have the same range that it's designed to have. Right. So now every step you take, even just standing still, even take out motion even from it, the force that body now is landing into that ankle, and the force, if you're walking, that's coming up from the ground in through that ankle, now can no longer be absorbed by that motion the same. And so now that's going to travel into the knee, into the hip, And it can come from the top down too. So if I have someone that comes in, for instance, with a hip issue, it might be a hip issue. And often it is. If it's a hip issue, if I find that it's a hip issue, I still look up and below and above the chain of that hip to see, okay, is there a back issue showing up as well? Is there a knee or ankle issue showing up as well? If there is, then we can address those too. If there's no hip issue there though, then that might be coming, and most likely is coming from somewhere above and below the chain as well anyways. And so sometimes it's really easy to determine where the actual cause is, and sometimes it isn't. Sometimes we just know, okay, there's multiple things happening and we want to address everything so that we're getting to actually the root and not just addressing the compensation. So I'm not sure. Does that answer it better?
It does.
Okay.
It does. It was an easier question to answer at the very least, right?
Yeah. The body is very complicated.
It is.
And we still don't know much about it, honestly. I mean, we think we do, but like I said, even in, some of the things I learned in kinesiology, when was that? Like 20 years ago?
Yeah.
Scary. Things have changed. The things that we know about the body have changed, or we have more information on systems that we didn't think were important. So, and that's going to continue. I don't think we're ever going to really fully have 100% understanding of how the body really all integrates together.
Absolutely. I mean, we treat the body as a very macro, at the very macro level, right? But as technology gets better, we'll be able to better study it at the micro level, and that's where a lot of these things will reveal themselves.
Totally.
You mentioned car crashes earlier. That tends to be the most common time, I would assume, where somebody is prescribed, hey, go see a local chiropractor. But I'm sure you are of the opinion that we should be seeing them outside of getting into a car accident. So what would the symptoms be that would lead you to think that an individual should be seeing somebody like yourself?
Yeah. Well, I'll say, even you don't necessarily need a symptom to be assessed. If you want to know, I've had people come in that they're just, I want to know what my posture looks like. I want to know where I'm at. And then it doesn't mean that they're even necessarily pursuing care, even if I find something, and that's fine. I think having information about yourself and your health and making those educated choices is empowering and awesome that people are even seeking that. So there's definitely assessment. If there's something to find in a misalignment, like a subluxation as we call it, or a, imbalance or postural improvement that can be, offered, we're going to find it whether you have pain or not, because we're trained to do that. Now, if someone does have symptoms, the most common symptoms I would say that bring people in are headaches, neck pain, back pain. Again, back to back specific kind of spine specific thing, which makes sense. The spine is my bread and butter, and I see a lot of it. And so if people have dysfunction, it could be pain. It could be something that is coming and going and just never going away over time. And they just get fed up and don't want to deal with it anymore. I've had people that are training for a race and they just want to make sure that they're not out of balance so that they don't end up injuring themselves, or they do get injured during training and they're wanting to kind of make sure that they can make it to their race.
No, I think that's perfectly fair. And I have to say that those individuals going to see you without symptoms, they are absolute rock stars. They're
rare,
superstars.
but
it is very rare.
It happens,
right?
yeah.
Now, because you did mention back pain, 80% of the population has suffered to varying degrees some level of back pain at some point in their life.
Yep.
I can't imagine that you would subscribe that each and every one of those individuals goes to see a chiropractor. You might. But if we were to put that severity on a scale from 0 to 10, this is a very subjective question, so nobody's going to hold you to this.
No, it's okay.
But if it were up to you, where on that threshold of pain are you like, okay, it's time. I got to go see a chiropractor?
If it was me? Or just like as a patient or as a doctor?
As the patient.
Okay.
As the patient.
I don't know why people would want to suffer in the first place.
We do.
But everyone is different. I'm amazed often at how much people are willing to subject themselves and put up with. And I think a lot of it is because they become, especially if it is chronic, it's hard to believe that it could ever be okay, because they forget what it could feel like to not be in pain or not to have, dysfunction or limitations or restrictions. Or they don't think that anything is actually going to help because they have tried everything and they're like, well, what, I'm going to do one more thing. And they're just kind of burnt out from trying. And I get that. I had more to say to that, and I totally forgot.
That's okay. Give me a number.
Oh, a number of, like threshold?
Yeah.
I mean, I think I'm going to answer this in a slightly different way, and I can give you a number after that if you still need a number. There's three aspects of pain or symptoms that I usually communicate in terms of measuring improvement. Okay. One is the intensity. So you're asking intensity. Intensity is one piece of that.
Okay.
The other is frequency. How often is this happening? Is this happening every day? Is it every minute of every day? Is it once a month? Is it once a year? Often in the history, we'll go through their immediate symptoms, but we'll also go through their full health history to see, okay, well, what else are you experiencing? Because that can be relevant of, also whether or not I even want to adjust them or if I'm the right person for them. Mm-hmm. And I'm amazed when often, if say headaches, they don't have headaches as their prime concern. And I'll ask them, okay, do you get headaches? Yeah, but just my normal headache. I said, okay, well, what's your normal headache? Oh, it's not that bad. It's like a couple times a week. Couple times a week? You have a headache a couple times a week? That's a lot. But people don't even know because they talk to their colleagues and they're so used to it. Mm-hmm. So frequency is major. And then duration. So do you have, a little ache in your shoulder because you overdid it at the gym and it's a 1 out of 10 and it goes away after, stretching and heat and you don't ever notice it again? Well, there are some normal things that can happen in the body that are uncomfortable. Again, that's where my expertise is and that my colleagues' expertise is in determining, okay, is this something that's a normal, again, a normal, I don't like that word either. Right. But an understandable or an acceptable, symptom, or is this something that actually is a sign of something greater, whether it's in that shoulder or actually stemming from something else?
That is much better than a number.
Okay.
I was just trying to get you to say something like that. That makes a lot more sense. Yeah. And I'm sure somewhere along that frequency, severity, and intensity, function has to play in there as well, right? Are you able to, is it so intense that you're not able to do the things that you do day to day, right?
And are you doing something that's appropriate? Occasionally someone will have, something going on and you'll ask them what they've been doing and it's something that, is maybe a little absurd. It's like, well, and it's the simplest, like, well, okay, don't do that anymore. It can be maybe a yoga posture. And I love yoga. I'm a yoga teacher. But not every yoga posture is going to be the best posture for every body, for different reasons. And, it could be a workout at a gym. It could be their form, it might not be the exercise itself. It could be how they're doing, the squat or the deadlift or, and you see that in your own job, right?
All the time. And it's especially worse when it's under load, right?
Yeah,
if it's body
absolutely.
weight, it's one thing, still not great. But when you're starting to toss pounds on your shoulders, it's not great.
And the body weight's the foundation. And the one thing, how you do one thing is how you do everything, right? And so it can be really hard, especially for really active people who have been, well versed at the gym or in, events and team sports or what have you. It can be really hard to scale that back and to really take a hard look at the foundation with body weight, without the weights. But how you do one thing is how you do everything. And so if you're bending down with, a weight on your back in a certain form, you're also doing that when you're picking up your laundry and when you're picking up your child and every single time you go to bend over, so.
And that magnifies over the course of a lifetime, right?
Totally.
Okay. So because you are a good person, like all professionals, whether it's a chiropractor or physiotherapist, I'm sure you would prefer to never have to see your clients, meaning that they are in perfect condition.
Yeah.
It's not reality, but let's talk utopia. In a perfect world, how could a person best protect their body so that they don't need to see somebody like you?
I think a lot of it is again, going back to the physical, mental, and chemical stressors that they have in their life, we're not going to completely eliminate them. That's for sure. And there's times where sometimes, we get, blindsided by something in life, whether it's, a slip on ice or, I don't know.
You trip, slip, fall. It happens all the time.
You get laid off at work.
Sure.
And, enormous stress in your life or financial or whatever it is, that, not everything is necessarily in our complete control. And so understanding that all three stressors are interrelated as well. So if you are, for instance, going through more emotional stress, what you're eating and how you're moving your body and that you are moving your body are that much more important. And often, ironically, that's often when we start to fall off on those, right? And then we wonder why we're, in a pit or
spiraling downwards
or getting sick or what. Yeah, exactly. But it can be any one of those, right? If you have a car accident, then what you eat matters. Your thoughts around that and getting support if needed around that matter. So I think it's so individual and there's no blanket response because we all have our own daily life, but also, understanding everything that's happened to us or that we've been involved in the years prior have all kind of like also led to where we are. So everyone's, what's right for you may not be right for, formula of how to be well isn't necessarily exactly what I would recommend to the next person. But I would say overall, just, the basics, eating real food, drinking water, moving daily if you can. And, getting and with that also variety of movement. So getting, making sure you have some strength in your week, make sure you have some elevated heart rate in your week, make sure you have mobility, intentional mobility. And then again, like we mentioned earlier, looking at your daily life, are you sitting at a desk every day? Then you need to be doing some back strengthening and chest opening. You need to be, right? If postural maintenance and body function is, a value for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is it doesn't have to be as complicated as we make it. Really, it's just a matter of taking some time, doing some self-assessment, a little bit of awareness. What are my daily habits like? Am I stressed? Am I not? Really just taking that time to understand yourself.
Yeah. And one doesn't replace the other, right? We can eat super well. And if you don't move your body, there's a piece that's not going to be as healthy. And same with, I definitely find in my practice, the people that are, their lifestyle is on point, they get better results with me and they don't need to see me as often, which is great. That being said, that also doesn't replace what I'm looking at either, right? And so if someone doesn't have a great lifestyle, I just find they just need a whole lot more support from myself or their physio or their massage therapist or all of us. And so there's a place for everything. And I think having, if you do have a chiropractor or a professional that's looking at, your body balance and just having some sort of touch base to make sure that, okay, if things are building up and you're not necessarily sensing it, that you're able to catch it and before it becomes an issue.
Let's quickly talk about movement. It's a topic that comes up a lot. It cures a lot as well. So I understand that you're a fitness enthusiast. So let's remove that. Okay. So only because the average person isn't a fitness enthusiast. And when they think of movement, it's not with enthusiasm.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's go specifically back to your practice.
Yeah.
If you have somebody who is not resistant to movement, but they just don't care for it that much, what kind of movement would you prescribe? Whether it's exercise, I know you also do yoga. I don't care what the answer is. What kind of movements would you prescribe?
Well, one, I can't make anyone do anything. So I can offer them. And I do meet people where they're at. And I sometimes will ask people, if someone comes in and they're a sedentary, non-smoker, eat McDonald's every day, I just ask them, do you want to quit smoking? Like, is that something that you've desired, as an example? Or do you want to find mobility? And if they say no, I'll say, okay, and I'll be a resource for them, but I'm not going to ostracize them for that, because at the end of the day, it's their body.
Correct.
Now moving into someone who says, yes, I want to, okay, well, why haven't you? Trying to get to, what has prevented them in the past? Has it been finances because they think that they need a gym membership and they think they need to spend, money that they don't have, which is possible? Is it time or perceived time? Okay, well then how do we find pockets? Do you work downtown and you can, get a walk buddy at lunch and walk along the paths? We have beautiful paths in Calgary, is it so finding, I guess, the barrier that has, in their place right now. Mm-hmm. And then finding little ways to get movement. I had one patient who was really ill. So getting her outside in the middle of winter on icy pathways, that was not going to happen. She couldn't leave her house. And so just getting her even some seated movement. Okay, let's get your spine moving in every direction every single day. So we're going to flex, we're going to extend, we're going to laterally bend, we're going to rotate every day. And if that's all you're doing right now, then that's at least movement that you weren't getting before because you've been just in bed or you've been sitting or injured or whatever. So a lot of my home care that I recommend is pretty simple in the sense that I want it to be sustainable. And I'll tell people when I give it to them, if you look at this and you're not going to do it, let me know why and we can change it. Or if you get bored with it, then let's change it. I don't want to I get bored with things and I need variety. So I'm trying to have, again, that open dialogue to figure out, well, what's going to work for you. And I also am big on that intuitive movement piece. So there's times where I've really wanted and craved the gym personally. And then there's times where it's the last place I want to be. And so listening to your body also and knowing, okay, do I have a gym aversion because I'm being lazy? Mm-hmm. Or is it because I actually need some more calming exercises and I need more yoga or I need to go for a swim and actually slow things down instead of pushing my body further? And so giving people permission to really listen to what their instincts are telling them, and that it doesn't have to look a specific way. Movement is movement. It doesn't have to be the gym. You don't have to be a marathon runner, you don't have to do anything that you feel, angry about because that's not going to benefit them anyways.
It's a huge barrier.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So finding ways, and Calgary has a lot of resources, and even just listening through your other, guests that you've had here, there's a lot of cool ways to explore a variety of different things that you might be surprised. Like maybe it's line dancing and you just love line dancing because then you get social but you're still moving,
I love that. And I wish that more professionals, whether it's somebody like yourself, physiotherapist, a personal trainer, it doesn't matter who it is, but to meet their clients where they are. It makes a lot of sense, and not to create this false expectation, because you're right. Movement, exercise, activity is going to be different for everybody, and finding something that you like is paramount. Mm-hmm. It doesn't get more important than that.
And being okay for that to change.
100%.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Okay. So outside of your practice, it sounds like you're a yoga teacher as well. What else are you doing? What's next for you?
I'm trying to figure that out. I have so many ideas. I think a big part of what I see next is, continuing that education piece and finding resources or creating resources for people to access, whether they're a practice member of mine or not, that can give them, that starting points to start moving, whether it's an ebook or, an online movement course or, postural correction or who knows. I have so many ideas. Nothing that's, set in stone or kind of being executed right now. But, that's really what brought me into chiropractic in the first place. I wasn't born a chiropractor. I wasn't born going to a chiropractor. I knew nothing about them. And it was that desire, back to that original aha moment of why don't people just do this why don't you just take care of yourself in the first place? You don't have to fix things when they're broken down the road. And, kind of that aha moment was inspiring to me. And, so wanting to share that empowerment that we have so much control over our health. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot that we can't control, but there's a lot that we can do. And the earlier we start and the more consistent, probably more importantly, more consistent we are with the positive things we're doing, it can be amazing to see what your body is capable of and how it can heal.
I like that. So if somebody's looking for Dr. Karen Quinn,
Yeah.
Dr. Quinn, aka, I promised I wouldn't do that, but
It's
I
okay.
just had to.
It's okay.
How did they find you?
Well, I have a website, drkarenquinn.com, karenquinn.com. And then Instagram is probably my most heavily used social media.
Okay.
I have some education on there as well with some anatomy and physiology posts and whatnot through the years. And that's at Dr. Karen Quinn.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay. So if an individual, anybody, man, woman, doesn't matter, is living an evolved life, what does that look like?
My first instinct with that question is that you're a work in progress. And so to me, being, evolution is change, is adapting to the environment, adapting to, different things that you might encounter that you may not predict, and just being willing to be an active participant in your life and continue to be a work in progress.
Amazing. Karen, thank you so much for being
Thanks
on the
for
show.
having me.
That was a lot of fun. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of My Evolved Life. If you found any value at all, and I know you did, make sure to hit the subscribe button below so you're always notified of new episodes. We'll be releasing a new episode every single week. So until next week, live an evolved life.